In the aftermath of a forgotten war, a discharged soldier walked home, but he didn't return to a life of peace. Instead, he brought the slaughter with him. Over the course of 3 years, he and his band of rogue mercenaries carved a bloody path across Central Europe, leaving a staggering 59 bodies in their wake. They didn't just kill for coin, they killed for clothes, for sport, and eventually for a dark, ritualistic hunger. His name was Martin Roháč, and he remains the worst serial killer in Czech history. Welcome to Cold Block. Among them was Martin Roháč, a native of Velká Bíteš. History gives us no portrait, no physical description, only the words of his confession. We know nothing of his childhood or early years. Based on what we know of 16th century Moravia, he was almost certainly illiterate. His education limited to basic catechism. A man of low social standing, with few prospects and fewer options. When the war ended, he found himself with a set of skills that had exactly one application. Gathering a group of about 8 fellow discharged mercenaries, he formed a ruthless band of highwaymen. They had no intention of returning to the quiet lives of peasants. Their method was chillingly pragmatic. Robbery was the goal, but murder was the standard operating procedure. Dead men tell no tales. They would ambush travelers, slaughter them without hesitation, and strip them of everything, down to their very clothes. This wasn't just greed. Wearing the garments of their victims gave them a practical disguise, the appearance of ordinary merchants or travelers, making it easier to approach their next targets without raising suspicion. The slaughter began in Transylvania. 4 men were murdered on the road for a mere 24 gold coins. The trail moved west. Near Vienna, a merchant was killed for 40 gold pieces and 2 firearms. At Ravensburg, 2 more men died for a pair of swords. The trail pushed into Upper Hungary, the surviving rump of a medieval kingdom, wedged between Habsburg authority and the Ottoman frontier. In these fractured borderlands, a man could be robbed and have his hand severed at the wrist near Stupava, and no single authority felt clearly responsible for pursuing the killers. It was exactly the kind of jurisdictional no man's land that men like Roháč knew how to exploit. The body count climbed relentlessly as they crossed north into Moravia. In the towns and fields of southern Moravia, Uherské Hradiště, Uherský Brod, Hustopeče, they struck again and again. In Hustopeče alone, 3 men were murdered in a single day. Clothmakers were robbed of their entire stock. The band looted butcher shops in Vestanice. A Jewish man was murdered near Ivanchitz. No one on the road was safe. But as they reached southern Moravia, the band began to fracture. Some men took their loot and went home. Soon, only the most depraved remained. Martin Roháč, a former soldier named Mikuláš Micha, and a butcher known as Jan Čech. Reduced to a trio, their crimes didn't slow down. They escalated into pure nightmare. Moving into Bohemia, they began targeting pregnant women. In a twisted ritual born of underworld superstition, they murdered 3 expecting mothers, cut the unborn children from their wombs, and extracted their hearts, lungs, and livers. They cooked and consumed the organs at a place that would later be recorded simply as Chertova Krčma, the Devil's Tavern, believing it would grant them supernatural courage and prolong their reign of terror. But dark rituals offer no real protection. By early 1571, the countryside was gripped by fear, and regional authorities, the Zemski Hetman, were hunting the trio relentlessly. The crack in their campaign came when Mikuláš Micha was recognized and captured. He was thrown into the dungeons, where the magistrates prepared to extract the truth using the standard investigative tool of the 16th century, judicial torture. Armed with this confession, the authorities moved swiftly. Martin Roháč was captured shortly after in his own hometown of Velká Bíteš. Subjected to the same brutal interrogation, Roháč confirmed every detail. The confessions matched. The final court tally: 59 murders across 3 phases, spanning from Transylvania to the outskirts of Prague. The court of Velká Bíteš handed down a sentence designed not merely to kill, but to make an example. On February 17, 1571, the sentence was carried out. Roháč was bound to the pillory. The executioner severed the joints of his fingers, the same hands he had used to kill. As he was dragged to the execution ground, his flesh was torn with red-hot iron tongs at intervals along the route. At the site, he was staked to the earth. The executioner systematically dropped a heavy, iron-rimmed wagon wheel onto each limb, shattering the bones one by one. His broken, living body was then woven through the spokes of the wheel and left to die in the open air. The butcher, Jan Čech, vanished into history. But the execution of Roháč and Micha brought an end to the most prolific killing spree the region had ever seen. Today, Jack the Ripper is a global phenomenon, remembered, studied, and mythologized for 5 murders. Martin Roháč slaughtered 59 people across 3 countries, committed acts of ritualistic cannibalism, and yet his name has almost entirely faded from history. Buried in the obscure pages of a Moravian executioner's log, a ghost story that never got told. Roháč's 59 murders remain the highest body count firmly attributed to a single killer in Czech historical records. But the darkest chapters of Czech crime didn't end with the 16th century. Nearly 400 years later, in the quiet river town of Roudnice nad Labem, a gardener would begin burying things in his yard that he had no business burying. The newspapers would call him the Roudnice Monster. The courts would call him Czechoslovakia's first sexual serial killer. If you made it this far, you already know what this channel is about. Like the video, subscribe to Cold Block, and stay with us. There's always another door.